Alright, so you're moving to Atlanta, Georgia from Texas, but you really don't know what to expect. Well, in this video, I'm going to cover some of the similarities, some of the differences, and help you get a much better idea of what you can expect upon your move to Georgia, and that's coming up right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Living in Atlanta. This YouTube channel is all about helping you get to know what it's like to live in the Atlanta area. My name is Mark Brenner. I'm a local realtor, and I have helped a lot of people relocate to this area from Texas. It's one of the most common states that I get relocations from, along with California, New York, Illinois, and Florida. So I thought it would be helpful to do a video for those of you who are preparing to move to the Atlanta, Georgia area, or maybe somewhere else in Georgia from Texas, to give you some information to prepare for the move. It's a big move. If you haven't spent any time in the Atlanta, Georgia area, you might not know what to expect. So I'm not really going to be comparing cities. I have done that in a previous video. You can look out for living in Houston versus living in Atlanta. I'm going to try to touch on some of the things that someone moving from the state of Texas, which is a very big state with 5 major cities, to Georgia, and give you a general idea of what it will be like. Now, again, I want to emphasize I understand how big Texas is, how varied and diverse the living experience can be, from the culture to the weather, of course, to the cost of living, diversity, and everything. So bear with me. I'm going to try to speak in broad strokes, but certainly some of what I'll say may not apply to where you currently live in Texas. We're going to talk about weather, cost of living, things to do, overall vibe, and some major differences. So let's get right into it, moving to Atlanta, Georgia from Texas. All right, let's start off with weather. And again, I know this is going to vary tremendously in Texas. The Panhandle versus Houston, that's a huge difference. I understand that. So I'm going to focus on the Atlanta, Georgia area, as I have done in many videos, so that you understand what you can expect weather-wise coming from Texas. Overall, the weather in the Atlanta, Georgia area is going to be a little bit more mild and have more defined seasons than probably what you're used to, depending on where you're at in Texas. Atlanta is going to be slightly less hot than what you're used to, but in many instances slightly more humid. On average, we get 217 sunny days in Atlanta. This is a very sunny place to live. 51.5 inches of rain on average each year. And if I could describe the seasons to you, it would be like this. We have a long, hot, humid summer, a short, kind of cold, damp winter, where we rarely get any snow, and an absolutely gorgeous spring and fall with lots of sunshine and beautiful temperatures. I really think the climate in the Atlanta area is one of the best parts of living here. You don't have the same thing all year round like California. You don't have the extreme seasons like in New York. It's a fairly mild climate with distinct seasons, and most of the year it's really gorgeous. So compare that to wherever you are in Texas, and you should have a good idea of what you're getting into weather-wise here. One more quick note on this: if you are concerned about natural disasters, depending where you're at in Texas, you may have some firsthand experience with these. We really don't have them in the Atlanta area. Now, I know someone's going to say, oh, we've had tornadoes, we've had hurricanes. We have had a tornado touch down in the past, cause some damage in the city. It is extremely rare. It is not part of our everyday lifestyle to worry about that. Of course, we can be impacted by hurricanes that come up through Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, and those translate into really bad storms, but we never really get hammered by hurricanes like Florida or Louisiana does. We don't deal with earthquakes. Flooding is probably the most common issue we have in terms of natural disasters, but generally speaking, natural disasters are really not going to be something you're concerned about in your day-to-day life living in Atlanta. All right, let's move on to cost of living. You're going to be saving money, you're going to be spending more money living here. Generally speaking, across all subjects, your cost of living is going to be slightly higher in the Atlanta area. Of course, one of the great things about living in Texas, there's no state income tax. In Georgia, most people are paying 5.75% in state income tax, but that will be going down to 5.49% in 2024. Now, the average cost of homes is going to be lower in Texas depending on where we're talking about, but your property taxes are typically going to be lower in the Atlanta area. Georgia property tax is 40% of the full market value times the current millage rate, which comes out each year and is going to vary depending on the city and county that you're in. But on average, the effective rate for property tax taxes is 0.81%, and the median payment across the whole state is $2,021. Now, I can tell you as someone who owns a home in Atlanta, right pretty much near the average home value, my property taxes are less than $2,000 a year. So you probably will be paying slightly less property taxes in the Atlanta area than you were in Texas. Now, statistically, overall, Texas is about 3.6% cheaper than living in Georgia. Your groceries, transport, housing, childcare are going to be a little cheaper in Texas, but your entertainment and restaurants and things to do are going to be a little cheaper in the Atlanta area. Now, if you want to dive more into these prices, I found a nice website called mylifeelsewhere.com where you can do a lot of comparisons across cost of living and many other factors, so check that out if you'd like. If you're wondering what the gas price is in Atlanta right now, I just checked. It was $3.19 a gallon. And if you're wondering what it's going to cost to purchase a home in the Atlanta area and rent, the median sales price in Atlanta right now is about $399,000. I would say if you want to be inside the perimeter, you're going to need a starting budget of around $350,000 to get something move-in ready. You can get by a little cheaper than that, maybe something a little smaller, something that needs a little bit of work, but $350,000 to $400,000 is a decent starter home budget inside the perimeter in Atlanta. As you move into the $400,000 to $500,000 range, obviously you can afford a little bit more house. This is a typical suburban price in an area with decent schools starting range, and of course it can go as high as you want it to go. If you're looking to rent in the Atlanta area, of course you can get real cheap and rent a room if you needed to from $600 to $800 probably. If you want like a studio or one bed apartment in Atlanta, you probably need a starting budget of around $1,350. If you want a nice 2+ bed unit, you're probably going to be closer to $1,750. There are a lot of houses available to rent in the Atlanta area. You're probably going to want a budget from between $1,800 to $3,000 a month, depending on what part of town you want to be in. If you want to be in a nice suburb where there's decent schools, your budget for renting probably needs to be about $2,000 to $3,000 a month to rent an entire house. You can find ranches on the east side to rent out for maybe $1,700, $1,800, which is really nice. But that's not going to be an area necessarily with great public schools or a ton of amenities. So compare those housing costs and other general costs to what you're paying for in Texas, wherever you are, and you should have a better idea what it's going to cost you in Atlanta. Now let's talk about economy, and this usually relates to job opportunities. These two economies are really booming. You know, I always talk about the diversity and strength of our economy in Atlanta. There is a ton of opportunity here, either to start your career or continue it. We have tons of Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies. I think it's 18 Fortune 500 companies headquartered here and like 27 Fortune 1000 companies headquartered here. And honestly, one of the only markets around the country that can compete with Atlanta in terms of economic diversity and strength is going to be a few different cities in Texas. I know Dallas-Fort Worth is absolutely booming right now, as are many other slightly smaller cities in Texas. So if you want to get technical, Atlanta might have slightly less economic diversity and opportunity than you would in many Texas cities, but I don't think you're going to notice that difference. But if you're concerned about starting a career or just general career opportunities, don't be, because Atlanta has a ton of opportunity. It's a great city for entrepreneurs, for business owners, people starting businesses. In terms of the major players in our economy, it's finance and education and healthcare, tech, media and film, transportation, and a few others. So very diverse, a lot of large sectors that you can choose from to continue or start your career. There's a lot of opportunity in Atlanta, Georgia. It's one of the best things about living here. Now, in terms of what it's like to live in Atlanta versus Texas and the way that the city is laid out, from all the research I could do, Atlanta kind of has the Houston sprawl. Houston's a much larger sprawl, but Atlanta has a similar type of sprawl to Houston with maybe slightly more Dallas vibes in terms of your day-to-day activities, entertainment, nightlife, things to do. So it's a combination of those two. I'm sure you will correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. That's my best estimation. Again, if you're worried about Houston specifically, I have a specific video living in Houston versus living in Atlanta where I focus mainly in Houston. I know Houston is by no means extremely similar to Atlanta. The similarity to me is just the sprawl, maybe a little bit of a climate. But from what I'm reading, Dallas in terms of lifestyle is a little closer to Atlanta. Now, in terms of your overall vibe and lifestyle experience, I don't think this is going to be a big shock, right? You're still in the Southeast. You're still in the Bible Belt. I came to Atlanta from New York. That was a huge culture shock and different in every way. I know Texas is different from Georgia, but you shouldn't have too much of a shock moving here. Of course, you've got the major progressive city in the middle of a state that's typically more conservative, more religious. You do have that juxtaposition, which I'm sure people in Texas are used to. Living around Austin or any of the major cities, it's going to be somewhat similar. You have conservative mixed in with liberal. You have religious mixed in with non-religious. You have a red-leaning state with blue-leaning cities for the most part. Plenty of churches and spiritual and religious people in the Atlanta area. If you're concerned about gun laws, it shouldn't be a big transition. I don't know the gun laws in Texas, but in Georgia, any lawful weapons carrier can carry concealed or not concealed handgun without a permit in Georgia. So we have very lax gun laws here. In terms of the vibe of Atlanta, what you can expect, I describe it as entrepreneurial. A lot of entrepreneurs in this city. We're a city in the forest, so green spaces, nature, outdoor life is a huge part of our culture here in Atlanta. Of course, we're known for great nightlife, entertainment, clubs. We love our festivals and food halls and beer in Atlanta. Music, obviously, is deeply embedded into the culture here in many different ways. Of course, the civil rights movement is a huge part of the culture here in Atlanta as well. But this is a great city. It really grows on you. I talk about all the time how I kind of hated it at first, developed a love for it, really fell in love with the nature and the green spaces and the opportunity here. I built my business here, so Atlanta really does grow on you. Georgia is a gorgeous state. There's a lot to explore in Georgia. The North Georgia mountains, there's vineyards up there, there's Blue Ridge Mountains, there's camping, kayaking, hiking, everything you can want to do outdoors. So Georgia is a gorgeous state and Atlanta has a lot to offer. Now, just finishing up with some random differences that I wrote down. I want to make sure I cover everything. So traffic is a big one you're going to have to be prepared for. I'm sure the traffic in Houston and Dallas is awful. It's probably worse in Atlanta. We just don't have the infrastructure for how quickly we've grown. So, you're on a lot of back roads. There's a lot of traffic jams on the interstate as well, of course. The drivers are not great. There's always an accident, debris in the highway. So traffic is a real issue here. I don't think it's as bad as LA or DC. It's pretty bad. Of course, like anywhere else, you get to know your routes. You get to know your times. I'm blessed by not having to be in an office at a certain time, so I don't deal with it as much as some people who are commuting do, but it can strike you at any moment for no reason and really put a damper on your day. So just know that the traffic is pretty bad here. In terms of diversity, I'm sure this is important for a lot of you watching. I'm not going to really speak on the diversity in all the cities in Texas, but I can tell you Atlanta obviously has a huge population of Black people. I think we're about 47% African American, 39% white, like 5% Asian, 5% Hispanic. So you do have some diversity. It's not a true melting pot like a New York City, but there are lots of different ethnicities represented here. If you're living in the Atlanta area, I don't think it's a place where you may feel unaccepted. Of course, unfortunately there's racist people everywhere, but I know people can be concerned with it being Georgia about if they're going to feel accepted. If you're anywhere within an hour of the city, I'd be pretty surprised if you're going to deal with that in a big way. But in terms of diversity, we're mostly Black and white with decent Asian and Latin American populations. Definitely don't have nearly the Latin American population that many Texan cities do. Already talked about kind of the sprawl, the Houston sprawl and the Dallas vibes. The nightlife from, everything that I'm reading and researching and talking to people is going to be a little bit more vibrant in Atlanta. It's kind of what we're known for. If you are moving to Georgia, you should know about ad valorem tax. That's going to be 3% of the fair market value of the car that you're bringing into Georgia. And there are exemptions and benefits for military and last responders, so make sure you take advantage of those if you are taking your car from Texas to Georgia. And those are really a lot of the major differences. I'm sure I missed some. Please comment below to help others, but I don't think this is going to be a major transition that freaks you out. I help people move here from California, New York, and it's a lot different. It's just different, right? You're comfortable with what you grew up with, what you experienced in your childhood, and so there could be a little bit of a shock, but coming to Georgia, coming to Atlanta from a city in Texas, I think you'll be right at home. You can tailor your experience, right? If you grew up in rural Texas, maybe you work in Atlanta or you need to be close to Atlanta, you can go a little bit further out, have a decent commute, and still have more of a rural feel. Of course, if you're living in the city and you want to be in the city, you can move to the heart of Atlanta. So you can tailor your experience depending on where you're commuting to or where you need to be. But all that being said, I think you're gonna love living in the Atlanta area. It really is a great city that grows on you. Get to enjoy the outdoors, be outside, enjoy the nature, enjoy our city in a forest, go to some festivals, meet some new people, enjoy the nightlife in the city. And I think before long, you'll feel right at home. So there you have it. Moving to Atlanta, Georgia from Texas, some of the things that you need to be aware of. If you do need to purchase a home in the Atlanta area, this is what I do. This is why I make these videos. So I would love if you reached out to me. You can book a Zoom call using the link in the description below. You call me, email me, whatever you want to do. But I absolutely love when my viewers become clients. So thank you so much for watching. Comment below anything I missed. And until my next video, I'll see you next time.